hi everyone. So I think we should be starting. So I see that 17 people are watching right now. So I just wanted to thank everyone who helped with timecodes. This is amazing. Thanks a lot for your help. Thanks a lot for doing this. And yeah, so usually we create issues with timecodes, and this is so nice to see that you contribute there, you leave the timecodes, and it's very helpful for everyone. So thanks again for doing this. We'll probably think of some sort of reward for doing this, like a reward system like we have for filling frequently asked questions. So we'll probably have something like this for timecodes, just to thank you for the timecodes. And I think what I should do is just share my screen. And I don't know, Kevin, do you want to say anything before we start?
Just want to say that I've seen a lot of questions. I know Prefect 2.0 has some rough edges, and that's because we're still in beta. Although a lot of the questions I think are we should address here because they seem to be like a lot of them are like just some misunderstanding on the concepts around 2.0. But then yes, I noticed there are some people as well who have run into some rough edge cases here and there, and definitely like we're taking that feedback and passing it to the product team as well. If you need something really production ready like today, then Prefect 1.0 is always there. It's just that we're in this process of moving to 2.0.
And I guess that is the choice you made to use 2.0 for the course, right? Because this is the way forward, right? It's
Yeah.
easier than the previous one, and it makes sense to use this one for the course rather than the previous one.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just share my screen. So we already have questions. So perhaps we can start with this. So the first question is, Kubeflow was part of the initial curriculum. Will we still be learning this? Yes, we will still be learning this. Yeah, the part about Kubeflow will be just a bit delayed. So we'll still have the materials about Kubeflow, in particular Kubeflow pipelines, because Kubeflow is quite a large thing. So we'll have this later, and hopefully by the time you start working on the project at the end, you will have materials about Kubeflow as well, so you can see that and check and decide what you want to use for the project. So yes, the plan is that we will still be learning this. Oh, maybe we can address this one before jumping to the next ones. So why Prefect? Why not Airflow? Maybe first, before Kevin, you help answer this with this one. I just want to say a few words about using Airflow. So we used Airflow for the previous course, the course about data engineering, and it was a nightmare. Like it was very difficult to set up such that students do not have problems with this. It was a nightmare for students to run it, and it was a source of countless problems and questions. And yeah, so Airflow is quite popular indeed for workflow orchestration, but the amount of problem it gave us was just unbelievable. For such a simple tool, it's a good tool, but hopefully I think Prefect is way easier. So you just you saw it in the lectures, and I didn't
Yeah.
see a lot of not complaints but problems that we have now in Slack. We don't need like a gigantic Docker Compose file to run this. And maybe Kevin, maybe you can say a few words about that as well.
Yeah. So yes, Airflow is, like the org like has a lot of history. Actually, the founder of Prefect himself was in the PMC, the maintainer committee of Airflow, right? I don't know if I mentioned this in the lecture videos, but the founder of Prefect at one point had the third highest commits in Airflow, and he was responsible for migrating Airflow from Python 2 to Python 3. So he touched a lot of the code base in Airflow. Now, um, at some point he created a list of features that he wanted to bring Airflow, like to upgrade to Airflow 1 to Airflow 2.0. That list of features got rejected, and at that point he started his own orchestration framework. Right. So what's wrong with Airflow? First of all, a lot of times, like when we compare which tool we're gonna use, a lot of people they like to just like list out all the features and say, does it run on Docker? Does it run on Kubernetes? Can I parameterize flows, scheduling? And then you list them out and you kind of decide based on like this list. But that's not a good way to go about it, because you'll find that like more or less if you list out the bullets, they'll be pretty equivalent in some cases, in most cases, for the things that you're concerned about. But the more important thing is the implementation and the user experience when using the tools, right? So specifically with Prefect, number one, it's more lightweight, easier to test your scripts before you deploy. In Airflow, if you go through the Hello World tutorial, you need to spin up the infrastructure. Prefect 1 was the same way, actually. You had to spin up Prefect. I mean, you could just do like a flow.run and it runs like a local Python script. So the base level to test was much more lightweight. Number two is that Airflow has an inherent limitation in passing of data between tasks, right? So in Prefect, you may have seen that we just decorate stuff as tasks. I mean, never mind the result portion. We have to talk about the result portion, but more or less, you can pass data from task to task seamlessly inside the same Python process, right? In Airflow, they didn't really support this, right? So what they did was they opened this feature XCOM, which the Prefect founder wrote himself, right? So XCOM was a way to pass metadata, and then it became like abused to pass data frames around instead. But like for example, that mechanism in Airflow, if you have like a 10 gigabyte data frame, right, that's upstream, you need to make copies of that each time, right? Just because of the way Airflow is designed. So I find this may have been fixed in later versions, but I think Airflow was not built to pass data around. Another way that this manifests itself also is that, for example, we have a task library in Prefect. If you look at the task library, the sources and the sinks are decoupled. So you can say query from Postgres, that's a task, upload to S3, right? But if you look at Airflow's equivalent of their task library, because you really can't pass data from task to task, their operators will be something like Postgres SQL, a Postgres query to S3. It's like together. And then now you need to make every combination of those available in your task library. So that's related also to the passing of data. I could talk about a bunch more stuff, but maybe that's enough for now.
Yeah, I just want to mention that Airflow is quite a good tool, regardless of, like we said, that yeah, there are like sometimes it is more complex. It's quite a good tool and it's quite a common tool. So there chances are that if you start working, if you join a company and you start working as a machine learning engineer there or as a data engineer there, chances are pretty high that you will have, or you not have, but you will use Airflow there because there's already existing infrastructure. Yeah, so for that, if you're really interested in learning about Airflow, as I said, we run data engineering course where we covered Airflow. So you can just go there and check. Let me find data engineering Zoomcamp. Yeah, this link. And the module 2 there, let me enlarge this one, this data ingestion. Yeah, this is about workflow orchestration. And yeah, as I said, it wasn't super easy to set everything. And you see, like, for example, for one of the videos, for example, ingesting data to local Postgres with Airflow is like 1 hour, 17 minutes. So, yeah, and while Kevin's videos all in total, they take how long? 1 hour and a half, right?
Yeah, 90. We're 90 minutes.
Yeah, so just overhead in Airflow is a bit, there are more moving parts, so to say. It's a nice tool. It will not hurt to get familiar with the tool. So do it if you have if you want. It will be useful. And as I said, chances are that chances are that you will actually need to use it at work. So check it out. But yeah, we just wanted to have something more lightweight, let's say. Okay, the next question. Wouldn't it be fair to use some percentage for extra point versus two homework question? Homework points versus homework points one versus other. I am not sure what you're talking about. Perhaps this learning in public, and we on purpose did learning in public. We weight learning in public link contribution in the same way as homework, because sharing your work in public is very difficult. It seems simple, okay, like what's a big deal, like you just need to go to LinkedIn and publish, but still it's very difficult for many people to do this. That's why we want to give you a good incentive to do this, to share your work in public. That's why we want to score them equally. And this is the case for all our Zoomcamps, and it will not change. Many people complained saying, hey, this is not a good way, it's not fair, because it's so easy to publish something on social media versus it's so difficult to work on the homework. It is, I understand, yes, when you look at the amount of effort you need to spend to write a post versus the amount of effort you need to spend working on your homework, maybe it's not equal, right? But then the amount of not willpower, but how to say, like it's not easy to click on this publish button, and that's why we want to give the same amount of points for you clicking to the publish button as to submitting the correct homework solution. So yeah, we're here for learning, but also for sharing, and believe me, it will be helpful for you if you are more active on social media.
I want to plus one that, because like I feel like you guys are doing, especially if you go through the course, you are doing a lot of work, and it's such a shame if nobody sees it. I think that I mean, like for example, our dev, the current, like we hired a dev rel recently for Prefect. She's quite popular on LinkedIn. Her name is Kuya Tran, and she actually just graduated from college, right? But 2 years ago, she decided to make a data science blog every week, and she kept to it. And she published over 100 blogs in 2 years, and now she has over 50,000 LinkedIn followers, and she just graduated college, right? So like it really, like sticking to it and being consistent about it really helps.
And it's difficult. Like it seems simple. Okay, what's a big deal of just, posting something on Twitter? It's not a big deal, but it's still difficult, right? It's not because you think you will be judged, right? When somebody sees your post, you might think that, okay, somebody will think this is not a good post. In reality, nobody will do this, but still, every time I post something, I think that there is this internal block that you need to overcome to start posting. That's why it is not easy to post about these things on social media. Okay, I see that Zoom tells me that my internet is not unstable, so I hope you can hear me well and see me well. So let's go to the next one. So I try to deploy the ML model and my React app into cloud. Can I make a connection between the React app and ML model by API method to monitor the ML prediction? What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. So this is an interesting question because it's a question that we did not get previously in Prefect 1.0, right? So think about Airflow. If somebody asks you the same question about Airflow, it's like it's not really related because Airflow is normally tied to batch prediction jobs, right? And there's a bit of a spin up time. The scheduler runs every 5 seconds, right? Like there's just a lot of delay that I don't know that it can properly serve a an API. right? Now, if you are saying that you're going to hit the API and then it goes to like kick off a job, that is like more possible. And the batch job just takes a while and then you check later again and like see the status of it. That's more possible. But this question, so in Airflow, batch job only. Prefect 1.0, batch job only. Like it's just like, hey, the API triggers a flow run and the flow runs and then you check the result. 2.0 blurs this a bit. And in 2.0, this might be more doable because it's much more lightweight, that you literally call, let's say you have a Flask API and you have a flow in the Flask API and you call it and you have observability per API call, may be doable in 2.0. So this question is a new question that we've been seeing just because of the lightweightness of Prefect 2.0 specifically. But I will say though that Prefect is still first a batch orchestrator. This might work depending on the latency you need. But if you really need low latency, there may be other tools. I don't know, something like Temporal. Temporal is more about observability for each API call. So Temporal might be something to look at. It came out of Uber. Yeah, maybe
Uber.
if you search for the GitHub. Yeah.
This one,
Yeah.
Temporal AO, right?
Exactly. So Temporal, but it's not Python. This has no Python. So it's like definitely like for a different crowd. But like what you want is like there's a difference between like I have a job and I'm observing the job versus I'm observing this if this API call succeeded.
But what is this? Is this also a workflow orchestrator, orchestrating tool?
Somewhat. We get asked a lot about it from our users and like, how do you compare to Temporal? We don't think we're in the same bucket. They are observability around calls, API calls, right? But if you want to stick in Python, maybe you can try it with 2.0. I don't see a reason why you can't combine, like use Prefect inside an API.
It's interesting what they did with this R. How many R's are there? Yeah, I'll check this out. Interesting. Thanks. And maybe this question is also not just about batch prediction and about Prefect. Maybe it's also about, like, in general, how do you go about deploying a model? And for that, actually, I don't know, maybe if you already finished the module about Prefect, the next module is about model deployment. And I think, so let me just, I think if I go to YouTube now, and on YouTube playlists, and then this MLOps Zoomcamp playlist. So in module 4, there are already materials for module 4. So the first video there discusses possible ways of deploying a model, which is a web service when you need, I think this could be actually your case. So you have a front-end app making requests, talking, communicating with the backend app, and on the backend you can have some sort of, I don't know, a web service with the model. And the case we discussed there is this right direction prediction. So on the front end, you have user interacting, like trying to hire a taxi, and then on the back end, you have an app that is actually telling you the prediction, how long the ride will take. And yeah, this one, 4.2, is how do you take this and deploy the model, like this bin file that we have from the very first module that we created, this linear regression. How do you put this inside Flask and Docker? Yeah, so you will see this. There are actually tools for helping you with this. This is something we haven't talked yet about in module 4, but there are tools like Seldon Core that help with that, like with deploying your models. Yeah, I think it's called Seldon Core. Yeah, deploy machine learning models at scale. There is also a project called Kserve that is similar. But yeah, here we just see how to deploy a model with Flask, and there are tools that help you with that even more. Like I think in Kserve, It's relatively simple to deploy a model once you have all the Kubernetes setup up and running. But yeah, this setup is a bit not easy.
Have you seen Bento ML?
Bento ML. The name rings the bell. Bento ML. Unified Model Serving Framework. I have not. It's actually that's nice. So they cover all the three cases, so online, offline, and streaming.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And
It could have been
unified
just one
interface.
unit, right?
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I should maybe invite them to do open source spotlight so they can demo the tool, and then you will also see how to use it. So
I can connect you.
Yeah, I will give them a star just to remember, and thanks. Okay, so next one. When you run a flow manually on a local machine and then run the Orion server, you can see the flow run happened before the server started. How does it work?
Yeah, that's a good question. It shows you're thinking about what happened underneath the hood. So how it works is that there's what we call, like there is a temporary AI, the term is ephemeral API. So once you do your flow, it actually spins up that API and temporarily, and then uses it to insert stuff into the SQLite table. So when you first so the bare bones prefect is right, you get this API and the SQLite table. For more production, you can point to a Postgres table instead, but off the shelf it works with a SQLite database. Now it can just you spin up that API temporarily and then make inserts into that SQLite table, and then that's how it works. But if you actually do Prefect Orion start, then the API is there and there's a server and it's running. So yeah, that's an intentional design decision to make it easy, work off the shelf, but still be compatible with when you fully run the Orion server.
By the way, do you know what kind of features you use that do not allow or didn't allow Prefect to run on Windows? The server, at least.
It's just more like we didn't for some people, I think even in our course it was working. It's more like we just didn't explicitly test. And I'm not the one. One person was responsible for actually making sure that it run on Windows and writing the appropriate tests. I didn't see what the roadmap was. That really it meant for Windows full support. But it's the most common issues I see are for example, not being able to write into the temporary directory, stuff like that.
So you just initially didn't test perhaps for Windows, because I guess if you think about actual users, not students who learn it, the majority are on something Unix based, right? Not Windows.
Yeah. File paths also an issue that you have to explicitly test for. Yeah.
Okay. I know MLflow, they use, if you run it on macOS or Linux, they use GUnicorn. You could see this, but if you start from Windows, then they use, instead of GUnicorn, they use Waitress, just for serving, they think.
Wow. We are on GUnicorn. I don't know that we need to add another separate thing for Windows. I feel like they didn't, because the Windows release is coming out. Yeah.
I saw you use something like Uvicorn or something like this. There are so many VSGI servers these days.
You're right. Yeah, it's not GUnicorn. It's not Gunicorn. We do it, but yes, it's a WSGI server.
Uvicorn.
Yes, you're right.
Is it related to Unicorn?
I don't know.
It's it sounds almost like Unicorn, but it's Uvicorn. Yeah, there is a Unicorn. I have no idea actually why we need that, because I know that if you want to serve your Flask application in production, you have to use a VSGI server. I didn't really bother to find out why. I just know that you need to use G-unicorn or something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently there is a difference between, I think, I think others G-unicorn, I don't know in G-unicorn if you do this async
Oh,
stuff.
we support async flows and tasks, so probably we needed the async support here.
Okay, so another question that you might know the answer to is when will Prefect Orion be out of beta?
Yeah, estimated maybe a bit over a month to 2 months is the estimated timeline for now.
Is the roadmaps public somewhere? With all the
Roadmap.
features, bugs, issues?
No, yeah, we don't make a public roadmap because stuff is also subject to change. Like for example, you guys have gone through making the storage, and when you deploy a flow, the storage interface will change. And that's because the there is like a more integral component that was created, which I can't say publicly, but when it's announced, you will see that like it all ties together, like the way that we connect to AWS S3 to store our flows, and maybe we're also interacting with other AWS resources. It can all be like tailored to tied together to provide a much better user experience. So that is coming out probably within the next month or something. But yes, we don't have a public roadmap because we like some stuff, the interfaces to some stuff has been changing also.
Okay, thanks. In the homework, we deployed the workflow and had multiple models. Is it better to deploy using a MLflow registry in this case? What do you think?
For me, I think yes. I think MLflow, I mean, at least my opinion is that MLflow has good semantics for managing your models and the artifacts associated with them. You can also do stuff like deciding whether or not to promote a model to production. In my opinion, Prefect and MLflow work together pretty well. Prefect as a more macro level like orchestrator, and MLflow for the specific machine learning portion. Like for example, we didn't even show this in the lectures, but like a lot of times you have pipelines upstream where you have to get the raw data and like maybe get them from, in my use case before, we got them from SQL tables, and then we had to output them to S3. So like that's a step not tied to machine learning at all. Uh, but that's something that Prefect could also orchestrate before your machine learning steps, right? So there's a lot more to machine learning pipelines beyond the machine learning. There's a lot of ETL and maybe even the deployment. Prefect can manage those pretty well, and then use MLflow as task inside the flow.
So they are not mutually exclusive. You can use both Prefect for orchestrating the whole process, right? Of fetching the data, preparing the data, I don't know, doing some data transformation for your data frame, and then creating this, I don't know, feature matrix and so on. And then you train a model, then you log the metrics to MLflow, you register a model there, and so yeah, they are not mutually exclusive. And then you can also in your workflow can say, okay, if this model, the performance of this model is better than the performance of the whatever model we have in, I don't know, staging, for example, in MLflow, let's promote it to staging, this current model that we just trained. You can do all this in your workflow, right? And then MLflow remembers what exactly is in staging, what exactly is in production, what is the performance for each of the runs, and so on. So yeah, they are not mutually exclusive. Okay. I guess we covered that, right? Do you have anything to add here? No?
No, I don't.
Bonus, if it wasn't for the extra points I wouldn't have posted. It's been very helpful. I think this is related to the discussion we had about learning in public and sharing your progress on social media. And yeah, maybe you remember from the introduction video, there was a story from Michael who got extra money. That is a very nice story. yeah, if you didn't see this, the boss of his boss noticed the activity on LinkedIn and he got a rise. So
I
this
saw
is
that.
yeah.
Good for
Uh,
him.
yeah, exactly. So please do post. It will be, you'll thank us later. Um, Kevin, you mentioned Fugue briefly in lectures. Can you tell us where we can find, where we can use, how do I actually pronounce it?
It's
Fugue?
pronounced Fugue. Fugue.
Fugue.
Fugue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'll just say this briefly. We're actually in talks with Alexi as well to be an open source spotlight. So probably we'll give a more concrete demo there. But Fugue is mainly about bridge. It's not so in machine learning development lifecycle for big data. It's pretty hard when you have to use Spark. The reason is because it's hard to test Spark code, right? And like, for example, even if you use local Spark, it takes 30 seconds. The iteration is very poor, right? So the question is, how can you optimize the user experience for iteration? And then when ready, you just productionize. And Fugue is one of those bridges where you can just prototype in pandas. And when you're ready, you just change the engine underneath and then it runs on Spark code. So it accelerates big data projects. The not exactly MLOps ish, more on the compute side and the like actual like building a model kind of side. Yeah. But yeah, we'll be an open source spotlight. I can cover it a lot more there. Or you can direct message me.
Yeah. And yeah, if we think about, so the way I understood this project is we use this for data transformation. So before we can fit a model, before we can train a model, we need to prepare data to make sure the data is in the right format. And typically we use things like, I don't know, SQL or Spark or Pandas for doing this. So this is where you would use this in your ML development cycle when you prepare your data, when you fetch it from some data source, transform it, do some feature engineering, some calculations before it's actually ready to be put into your model. So this is where it fits in. So again, not super specific to ML, because there are many cases where you need data transformation, not just ML, but in ML you also need that. And yeah, and testing Spark is not easy, especially if we talk about this integration end-to-end test, right? Because you need to spin up a Spark cluster, even if it's local mode, and it always takes a while, right? There is some overhead.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of people, because of the like just the user experience with Spark, they just test on cluster instead, test on production. That ends up being very expensive.
Testing in production, this is what we love, right?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, hopefully in one of the models we have, so one of the models we have here in MLOps Zoomcamp will be about best practices. So we will try to teach you how to not test in production. So actually it's not one of these things we have here, but in Slack somebody brought this topic up of like showing different stages like staging and production and how to do this. So what we want to do is we want to show how to do infrastructure as code with Terraform, and then we want to show you how to use Terraform for setting up both stages and production, so you can do some sort of simple tests and staging and then promote things to production, which doesn't have much to do with ML in general. It's more like general software engineering. But yeah, so thanks a lot for the ideas. If you have other suggestions or questions, please let us know. And maybe this is something we can also cover in the future lectures. Notice that the Orion.db file is taking a lot of space in the VM. Any advice on that?
Yeah, so you have to, I guess, realize that. So if we talk about the prefect architecture, we have this. You're using Python. You interact with an API, and it persists stuff inside that SQLite table, right? So when you do something, for example, like you make a deployment and you schedule it every 5 minutes, by default, Prefect will schedule the next 100 flow runs. What it's actually doing is it's creating these runs and inserting them into the database. So now you have a flow table in the database. The flow table has like a task run table as well, right? So what we find is that if you actually like or if you actually want to deploy Orion yourself and you want to maintain it yourself and self-host it, it requires some maintenance. Like, I mean, for what you've done in this course, it shouldn't be that big. But I don't know what's happening there. I can also raise the feedback to the team to just see that it's performant. But to some extent, when you self-host Orion or with any orchestrator really, if you self-host it, you have to do some maintenance on that database that is backing all of the orchestration, right? So for example, with Prefect 1.0, it's very common, like every 2 weeks, that you truncate the logs table, the or the flows table, the task table. Now, that's one of the reasons why people use cloud instead, so that they don't have to do that maintenance, right? So if you use the Prefect hosted version instead, we're the ones responsible for doing that maintenance for you.
And I'm also wondering how much is a lot in this space? Is it like, are we talking about a few megabytes or it's like 1 gigabyte? That both feels a lot, right? So like even if it's a few megabytes, it shouldn't be that much perhaps, but if we're talking about, I don't know, 100 megabyte file, then something is definitely off, right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how much it, because for the VM, when we create, at least in the videos we have, like you, Kevin, you gave the VM quite a lot of space, right? Like a couple of
I gave
gigabytes.
16. I gave 16, yeah.
So, but in practice, you don't use SQLite, right? So you use something like Postgres or something like that.
That's right. You would use Postgres for production.
Hmm. And then you said you would also run like a weekly cron job that perhaps removes the old runs, right? To keep
Exactly.
Mhm. To keep your database fresh, right? More up to date.
Yeah.
Any reason not to do this? Not to do truncating? Like if you need logs from the previous runs, right?
It's still like if you need logs from previous runs, really you should be like outputting that to some log aggregation tool like Datadog instead, because like those are really optimized to handle that kind of thing. Whereas like having them in the same database for orchestration can just slow down your database, right? So for like logs is the number one thing that bloats the space. For logs, we really recommend using something like Datadog.
I see a comment in live chat. So it was 1 gigabyte plus for homework only. So it seems a bit off to me.
1 gigabyte is I would think that's a bit reasonable just because of the amount of
Okay.
spin up there is with tables. But
One
yeah,
gigabyte.
yeah, I
Wow.
think so. But I'm not 100% sure. I've never actually looked at it myself, but that doesn't scream like it's too bad. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that SQLite can actually handle that large files.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay. Mm,
I'll look into it though.
okay.
I'll look into it.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe you can share this information with Kevin in Slack. Is there a Cloudformation or CDK template to deploy production level Prefect Orion server on AWS?
Yeah. So actually for what prefect, but okay, so this question is a bit there's a bit of background to answer. In prefect 1, it wasn't as simple as, prefect or Orion start and like it all works on one box. No, it wasn't like that. We gave a Docker compose file and a Helm chart for Kubernetes, and it would spin up the database. It would spin up the API. It would spin up the scheduler. It would spin up 6 or 7 different services, right? And when you had 6 or 7 different services, the deployment became like you really needed Docker Compose or Kubernetes, like because we spin up multiple containers at a time, right? Now, uh, we had Terraform templates come out that would help you deploy stuff, but really just not all of those services. Really, like what we're expecting is that you have your own Kubernetes cluster and you just deploy it on the Kubernetes cluster. So no, we didn't have a CloudFormation template. But yeah.
You said
So we
Prefect. You have Terraform.
No, that's
No?
not us. Well, I'm curious now what that is. I've never seen it, but we don't have Terraform yet for 2.0. Oh, he's just asking for some. Yeah. So in 2.0, we're gonna have something similar where we're going to have some like either Terraform, because now it's like confined to one VM, you can just install it. We might have Terraform. We will have like a Helm chart as well so that you can deploy it. So the quick answer is it's very easy to deploy. You can deploy in one machine. You can just use Terraform. But the longer answer is yes, we will have a Helm chart eventually, and we will have like a Docker Compose as well. There was somebody in the chat who asked about Docker Compose, and I gave a community contributed repo. We reached out to that author to see how we could like get that Docker Compose, work on that to make it more official.
Yeah. Do you have some sort of bot that based on Slack creates GitHub issues?
Exactly. So our Slack is like 17,000 people right now. And if there is an interesting thread, like I'm the Kevin in that thread. So if there's an interesting thread that we want to archive, or like we want to open an issue on GitHub, we say, we at Marvin and we say open, and then we give the issue name. So we'd say at Marvin open Helm chart for deployment of Orion server. And then Marvin will create this issue and archive that Slack thread. So we don't have to rewrite the issue. No. Marvin is a private homegrown. It's not public. Yeah.
I was already imagining in my head how I add this to Datadog club, and then because we have this I don't know if you probably don't have the pro version, right? Because we have this 10k limit of messages, and it's pity when messages are gone. And I already started imagining how to add this Marvin robot to Slack to export all these threads.
Yeah, so we have three things. Number one is Marvin, but Marvin was not, he's okay, but like we had Discourse instead. And then we installed the Discourse app on Slack, and you can like say archive this to Discourse, and then it brings the chat to a Discourse thread. The third one we have is relatively new. It's called Linen. Linen permanently is a service that permanently archives all Slack messages, but I think it's not cheap either, but it makes it archives all messages and makes it Google searchable.
That's actually yeah. So Marvin works at Prefect. Okay, now everything is clear.
Marvin was down. You can see he was down for some time. Yeah, our service was down.
Like for a couple of months, right?
Yeah, like some key expired and nobody got to it for some time. Yeah.
Okay, and this one we see Kubernetes Flow Runner. This is what you actually use, right? When you set up Prefect Orion on Kubernetes, right? You use this stuff.
Yes. But we're not tied to Kubernetes also. You don't necessarily need it, right? You can do Docker Flow Runner as well. Yeah.
But in practice, what kind of deployment, what way of deploying things you've seen most frequently used? Is it Kubernetes?
It's directly tied to the maturity of your data organization, right? And it's a scale, right? If you already have Kubernetes, you will deploy Prefect on Kubernetes. If you don't have Kubernetes yet, you might just spin up one, we had serverless stuff like ECS, AWS ECS, and Google Vertex, where you just spin up. When 1.0 we had these where you just spin up, like a container. So like these like serverless containers. So you have a lightweight agent. When it sees a flow, it will deploy a container on ECS and just run the container, right? So we had that. That's not in 2.0 yet. But then into that, we've also seen people just running things locally. And that's like they're just starting out their data practice and just trying to get some pipelines going. And they just make a box and put Prefect on the box, and they just run everything locally. And that has worked for them. You can do that.
Okay, but if you already have Kubernetes cluster, you would just, I don't know.
For sure, just use the Kubernetes. Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, I wanted to ask you about AWS batch support, but you said you use ECS. I think under the hood they're pretty much the same thing, right?
Yes. AWS batch. We have it's more like we have a task for it. It's not like the flow runs in the batch. But to be honest with you, it's not one of the most used things like among our tasks. Like I've only seen like 3 people using it, maybe. I mean, I'm sure you could use it and not use Prefect at all. But I'm saying like of the Prefect users that spin up batch jobs, we don't have a lot. So yeah. But yeah, I think batch is more you can combine stuff also, whereas ECS is just like this the container. But I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. I am not that knowledgeable about ECS. I used it at some point. But yeah, it's like Kubernetes, but different Kubernetes, right? It's like a container management platform.
It's like Kubernetes jobs only. No,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, but this is AWS batch, Kubernetes jobs only, right? Or
No,
ECS as well.
ECS.
Okay. Mhm. Okay, let me just maybe actually I have a follow-up question. Well, because I was usually when you have like a task, a job in your workflow, different parts of your workflow, different jobs might have different uh, requirements. In one case, you need, I don't know, one Docker image, for example. In another case, you might need another Docker image, right, with a different set of system libraries, with a different set of Python libraries. Is it easy to do this with Prefect?
Yes. So,
Image, this
um,
task should use this image.
yes. So there's 2 ways to do this, right? Number one is that you can use tasks to create a container, spin up a container, run the container, spin it down. You can use tasks to orchestrate containers. So you have one flow that just does all these spin ups. But the I think the more prefect way is you use a flow of flows. So you can have a subflow in a flow, and a flow can take a Docker image already, right? So what you can do is you can just have one parent flow that calls multiple subflows, and each of them has their own configured Docker image. You might see there's this documentation stuff for a flow of flows in Prefect 1. That is how to make a Prefect image. Yeah.
This one,
This
right?
one. This one shows the paradigm that we have around. Yeah, so you can scroll down. So there's a create. Yeah, you can go down a bit more. Yeah, exactly. So there's a create flow run task. So you already registered a flow, and it has its setting of what Docker container it's going to use. So now you just kick it off with a parent, and you just like kick this off, wait for it, kick off the next, wait for it. So you could do it this way as well. 2.0 will be a bit, this is 1.0 code. 2.0 will be a bit different, but you could do it.
But you cannot for a specific task. For example, you cannot in the annotation say that
No.
you want to run this for this with this image. I think I saw some
No.
other orchestration tool that allows to do this.
Yeah,
But I guess it also adds a bit of overhead, right, in your
it does
workflow.
because the assumption, like, so that I think you're talking about flight specifically.
Yes, yeah,
Flight,
I think
yeah,
I'm talking about Flight, yeah.
Flight is Kubernetes native, but there's a Python interface, so each task gets its own image. I think the assumption there is that you inherently limit the passing of data between tasks because each one is its own container. So now you have to write that out somewhere before it can be consumed by a downstream task, right? In Prefect though, by specifically not tying ourselves to the container, for a task, you can pass data between tasks more seamlessly because they are running on the same compute.
So yeah, I think this is exactly it's coming from the demo that folks from Flight gave to Open Source Spotlight. I think in the I cannot see it here, but there was this add task thing annotation, and then in the annotation you can specify that what kind of image you want to use there.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah, so
flight.
this is very
Yeah,
Kubernetes specific, right? So you already say
exactly.
how many CPUs you want, memory,
Yeah. So if you
and
have
then in
a
principle you just, yeah, sorry, please go ahead.
no, yeah, if you have a Kubernetes cluster, you could check out Flight, but I think for us, we try to cater to people with less infrastructure as well, right?
Okay, thank you. So any chance we can have a session on how to apply these MLOps techniques to deep learning frameworks like PyTorch, TensorFlow? Um, yeah, well, many things remain the same. So maybe experiment tracking becomes a bit more involved in the sense that you need to track a lot more parameters when you are training a deep learning model. Then your workflow might also be a bit trickier because maybe one part you want to run on a GPU while the rest should run on CPU. By the way, is it possible to do this kind of separation, or it's again you use this flow of flows to do this?
Yes, and because this one is I mentioned, for example, we have tags, and you can make a deployment with a tag. So you can say that this flow, and like it's your PyTorch training job, this flow must run on a GPU, right? So now you put that GPU flow as a step inside the parent flow. You could do stuff like that, right? And then these guys may have their own like images that you need that may be too bloated to use for other parts of your flow. I will say that we also use Dask, for example, the Dask task runner. So if you have a Dask cluster, and let's say your Dask cluster has two workers that don't have GPU and two workers that do have GPU, you can use Dask annotations as well. And Kubernetes has some level of annotations as well, where you can say, I want to run this on this node, or I want to run this on this Dask worker. Yeah, there are ways to do this, yes. Um, and to add to this, the principles of MLOps, I believe, are the same. The concept of like, I need to serialize this model, I need to deploy it somewhere, they should largely be the same. But these deep learning frameworks have some special handling. Like you can't just pickle them. They have their own right, like methods to write out the saved model and stuff. Although I think this is where stuff like Bento ML really shines, that like they have a unified interface across, I believe, across like scikit-learn models and these deep learning models as well. So you can just have the same kind of base code to
Mm-hmm.
handle it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like how I just mentioned that we will have a workshop. This one, best MLOps practices for building end-to-end ML projects. Here, actually, we will talk about a computer vision problem. So it will be about segmentation, I think. So check it out. It's more focused on the iterative ecosystem of tools. Like iterative is the company behind DVC. So in this workshop they will show how to use all the three-letter abbreviation tools that they have.
That's
I think
funny.
they're big fans of three-letter abbreviations like TPI. I think it's Terraform, Provider Iterative, DVC
Oh,
Data
okay.
Version Control, CML is Continuous Machine Learning. They also have, what else they have? Yeah, they have a bunch of other stuff also with three letters. But recently they released MLem, which is four letters, not three. So they really
I've
broke the
seen, yeah.
pattern. Yeah. So yeah, check it out. It's quite interesting. So it partly overlaps with what we cover in the course. But yeah, they also add data version control there to as yet another concept to in MLOps, like data versioning. Yeah, this is pretty cool. Check it out. The use case they have focuses on computer vision, so they also show how to do this with GPUs and whatnot. Another thing I wanted to show you is our book. This is ML Zoomcamp that I mentioned many times. There actually we have, yeah, it's not much MLOps here per se. So here in this like module 8, I just show how to train a model in Jupyter notebooks, and we spent quite a lot of time here in this course explaining why Jupyter notebooks are not always ideal when you talk about MLOps and productionizing. But here, yeah, this is just using a Jupyter notebook to train a model. So maybe you can skip that one. But this in the module 9, I show how to deploy it with Lambda, the model we trained here. And then in 10, I show how to deploy this model with Kubernetes. So here in the serverless, we use TensorFlow Lite. We convert the model we trained with TensorFlow. We convert it to TensorFlow Lite and deploy with Lambda. And then in section 10, we use TensorFlow serving. So this focuses a lot on deployment, so which is only one of the steps in the process, and we have a lot more other steps. But yeah, if you're interested in learning a bit more about that, you can start here, and then you can check out this this workshop. And I guess, yeah, you'll need to do a bit of Googling yourself as well. But if you find any interesting links, any interesting tools, please share it in Slack. Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see what you find. Okay, should I mark it as answered?
I guess.
Do you remember LinkedIn? What did we talk about?
I talked about our latest hire. Her name is Kuyen Tran, and she has a blog where she has hundreds of blog posts about data science. I don't know how I can link her LinkedIn here. Yeah, Kuyen.
But I'll stop sharing my screen just to make sure I don't have any private info here. It seems I do not. Like, I'll try to find her. Yeah.
Oh, I can share my screen too if you want.
Yeah, I already found her.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
She
Kuyen,
joined recently, right?
She joined within the last month. So yeah, this is what I was saying, that Kuyen is a perfect example of like working in public, because like she committed to just like pushing out content on towards data science, one article a week. And like it's really helped her accelerate her career. She talks about it in like her other in some other podcast episodes. And I think she's just a real testament to working in public. She also posts a daily Python snippet.
But yeah, the engagement is amazing. Wow. Like every post has like a few hundred of likes. That's amazing.
Yes. So she posts a lot of like these like quick panda snippets as well, right? So just like for everyone, I know we like to think that nobody will learn from our post, but you know, there will be someone out there who can learn something from your post. So it's always worth building in public.
Especially if you're let's say if you're just starting your learning journey, and you might think this is not interesting for anyone. This is actually not the case. This is interesting for those who are also on the same journey as you, and maybe you're just a few steps ahead, right? And it will be interesting for them, especially because, for example, when I share something, I have all these years of experience behind me, right? And then it's not always easy for me to relate to somebody who is just starting in the field, because many things I take for granted. So I can say, you just go find Docker Compose file and run it, right? And for me, it takes a second to think about this, and then I think, okay, problem solved, done, and then move on, right? But for somebody who doesn't know what Docker Compose is, right? This is like a couple of weeks of learning to figure out what I mean in this sentence, right?
Yeah, and I want to say, like, I mean, like you can tag me for this week's, if you're posting about this week's content, tag me. I'll comment, you know, like I'll support your post.
Okay, actually that was quite well timed, right? So we covered all the questions, and we are almost over. So I don't know, do you want to say anything else before we wrap up?
Yeah. There's one thing that I've seen commonly asked in the Slack channel that didn't come out as a question, and that's when we have to use the results interface in Prefect, right? So the question is, why do we need to use results? And some of you think that we have to use results when a task has multiple outputs. This is true. It's not entirely the case. The reason we use dot result is, for example, we have a task, and this is true for any kind of interface that uses futures like Dask, like Prefect. When you call a task, it does not materialize the Python object yet, right? It happens asynchronously. So now you have a future object, and because you have a future object, you can't do stuff like, is this future greater than 3? Is this future true? You cannot compare with the native Python if else. You can't loop over a list. It's not a list yet, it's a future. So by calling dot result, you bring it into Python, you make it a native Python object, and then you can run whatever you want on it next. So that's when you use result, when you actually need the result of a task, the return. Yeah, so that's it I have.
Okay, and future is something like I remember when I was just learning about it was back in the Java days when I was a Java developer. This concept of a future was somewhat not easy to grasp. So this is a promise that at some point this thing will return you the result, right? So you know that the result of this task is a future, and when you say, I don't know, x.result, you wait till the task finishes, and only then you have the result. So you add this waiting sort of part in your flow. So you have to wait till the task finishes. I think I'm making people more confused right now.
No, that's a good description. I find it funny because we had dot wait. So before it was like x dot wait dot result, and we were like saying it's too much to type. Why don't you just say dot result? So we took out the wait, and we just did x dot result, and now that waits if it didn't complete yet. But I guess having wait be explicit was a lot clearer that I am waiting for the completion of this future, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, and so this concept of future, or sometimes it's called a promise. So this, but yeah. So this says that this object eventually will give you a result when the task finishes. So when you say x.result, you just wait when the task explicitly finishes and gives you the results, right? So you kind of wait. I guess I'm just saying the same thing I said a couple of minutes ago. Okay, I think that's all, right? I don't see any more questions. Yeah, so thanks a lot, Kevin, for joining us today. Thanks everyone for joining us as well, asking questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'll see you guys.
Yeah, so we still have, when is the deadline? Till Saturday. So you still have plenty of time to finish the homework. And yeah, enjoy learning.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.